Morning, morning, everybody. Michelle is here. Michelle is here on April 13th, 2026 on a Monday. Monday's here. So I hope everybody's doing fantastic, magnificently, and marvelous because I am. I'm up early because I have some appointments to go to. But I wanted to come on through and say to you, you know, there was something, there's a lot of people think I told you, a lot of people think they're smarter than they are. They think they're more clever than they are. They think they're so highly intelligent and they just know. And in most cases, they don't have an idea what the hell they're even talking about. And they do not have an idea of what they know. Okay. And a lot of it is cowardice. A lot of it is hidden in low self-esteem. A lot of it is just performance. So there have been a lot of situations that happen more particularly in this country, the United States of America. And the cleverness is coming back to haunt a lot of people. Okay, a lot of people did not realize that life is not a game. Okay, life is not a game, but yet we play games with life. I've said that. A lot of people say, well, what does that mean? Figure it out. There are some people who know, and there are some people who don't know. Okay, and in most cases, that so-called hierarchical structure, those tentacles I told you about of religion, politics, the media, law enforcement, parts of law enforcement, more so all of it, sadly. And these so-called billionaires or business leaders, and and the rest of that. But it's the tentacles of a religious that we've allowed to indoctrinate us. Okay, keep in mind we have to take our accountabilities and responsibilities for what happened to us. Okay, that's fine. The great thing about it is, though, when you understand that life is not a game, you develop yourself properly. And what do I mean by that? Well, you grow up, in the cultures in the culture I came from, where either you, as they say, sink or swim, or all these parables, idioms, all these metaphors, all this language is valuable. But more importantly, what's valuable is when you can figure things out on your own, using all of your modalities. My strength was visual, as I said, and I used to be able to sense by, when I'm talking to someone, I can immediately tell now when I think about it, how much they were a bunch of liars who lied to me. And I was able to pick up certain characteristics about people, and I realized, after I got out on my own and started reading books, like 300 pages books on psychiatry, on philosophy, on meditation. I just was reading and reading and reading because I had a thirst for that. I just wanted to know what was going on, because I wasn't necessarily told so much about what's going on. I was always told to figure it out. My parents were too busy with all the rest of the family. My dad was working so much. I just had to figure it out. And so I started paying attention to what people were doing versus what they were saying. And that is where a lot of disappointment came through, when I realized people were not walking the talk. And I'm talking about, say, for example, certain teachers, certain so-called authority figures, these so-called brilliant mind of people that we give all of these titles to that they have not earned. And then, like I said, it was disappointing because I recognized, the bias in people. I recognize the bias. I recognize the discrimination. I recognize the racism. And the more importantly, I recognize, how women are treated, how biological women are treated. And, it was eye opening. It really was. And it took decades of contemplating that and absorbing what that all meant. And then in 2008 was the breakthrough. 2008 was the breakthrough for me. And that's when I was literally sleeping on the floor in an apartment I had at the time. Okay, sleeping on the floor. Okay, or on a pallet, as they used to call it. And I got the injuries to my back from sleeping that way for a while, at least. But 2008 was the breakthrough for me, and that's when I snapped out of it and got a grip and realized, okay, mediocre doesn't work for me, and mediocre doesn't work for a lot of us. Okay, especially the innately inclined. I've told you who they were, who they are, what they are, and why they are. Now, whether they are snapping out at it and getting a grip, well, let the results speak for themselves. I sense that is a breakthrough throughout, and that's what happens with energy. But let's not take it there for now. So again, life is not a game. Okay, we're not living in a matrix. Okay, we're not living in simulations. There is the supernatural is nothing more, nothing less than entertainment. Okay, and when you recognize how you allowed yourself to be indoctrinated, and then you snap out of it and get a grip, you talk about freedom. The freedom is, my words cannot express what that is, because everything starts flowing properly, and you start to see clearly now. You start to see clearly. In 2008, I saw clearly, but then I recognized I had to get myself out of my own grave that I caused. I had to take accountability and responsibilities for my life, because I put myself where I had to be sleeping on the floor, no furniture, couldn't afford it. Okay, so that was a breakthrough as far as the president at the time, but I didn't have a television at the time to even know what that was all about until I went onto the internet. I've said enough about how my journey, is continuing. My discovery is continuing, and it's an adventure. It's an adventure. So I come through to say this: cause and effect is what I stress on. But listen to this. For just so many people, like I said, thought they were this intelligent breed of people. They thought they thought they were the pedigree of intelligence. Okay, but it turns out, all of that is getting exposed. It started in 2025, maybe even in 2022. When I had some issues in 2022, when I was sharing certain things and I became a target. So it turns out maybe millions and billions of people became targets and they didn't know. Okay. When the exposure was deep. It went generations back for some people. Starting in the 1700s. I like to keep pointing to that, because that's where there was an opportunity to stop the train that we're on right now in 2026. Figured it out. we have these so-called declarations of independence, the U.S. Constitution. And so what I'm thankful about is a lot of people, not in the USA, unfortunately. The USA is on a course of destruction, and the writing is on the wall, okay? The mediocreness exposed itself too. These people were acting like they were high rollers, the big dogs, they thought they were the shit. I keep saying that. That's all being exposed. Okay? They were playing life as a game. They thought they can go into some dark rooms, like I said, with cigars in their ass, and perpetrate this sense of intelligence and dominance, and this sense of superiority, dominance, and playing games with people's lives, literally, figuratively, and metaphorically. I think I read somewhere that there were, based on the wars we've been in, probably since the 1700s. I mean, it goes into almost 200 million people. Maybe, I'm sure it's more. Almost a billion, possibly, since the 1700s. Listen to what I just said there. Almost a billion people, or under a billion people, were unalive because of war. And those tentacles too, because of religion. So combine all of that, law enforcement, what they've done. So imagine this. We're almost 10 billion people. Okay, since the 1700s until now, we've caused the unaliveness of almost a billion people. Okay, and the brilliance was never there. It was foolishness, cowardice, and low self-esteem that was at those tables. Like I said, with the cigars in their ass, believing they were the shit, that they were the intelligent ones, they were the geniuses, and now all that's coming back to haunt them. Unfortunately, a lot of us are going to have to, navigate our way around all of that, and some of us are going to be collateral damage, innocent bystanders. It's going to affect the whole planet. Okay, so just know this, okay? Life is not a game, but we've been playing life as if it's a game. We believe we're in a matrix. We believe we're in a simulation. We believe in the supernatural. A lot of people are snapping out of that. And a lot of people you ought to be upset. You ought to be angry. But at the same time, be kind and gentle with yourself as you are navigating your way through this. It's not gonna turn out pretty. Okay, it's not. But a lot of outside countries continents outside the USA, they're gonna figure it out well before we in the United States of America will. Okay, the damage has been done. You cannot, as they say, you cannot turn back the hands of time. You can't, even though we believe we are, and we believe we can. And hey, the delusion is real. The illusions are real. People are snapping out of it, and they're terrified, and they ought to be. They're going to realize what they have been living in. And again, a lot of the children and descendants are going to bear the brunt of it all. I said this a few years ago. The parents of the parents ought to be apologizing to your children, because your children are going to bear the catastrophic, effects of what the so-called brilliant minds were doing, playing games. Playing the game, in life, believing life was a game. Hey, you win some, you lose some. sadly. So for those of you that are snapping out of it and recognizing what's happening, do not necessarily share so much about your move, literally, figuratively, and metaphorically. Just keep playing their game, but make sure you understand what you're playing, and hopefully you're not playing the game of life. You're realizing life is not a game, and so you're recouping, you're recalibrating, you're realigning yourself, okay, and grounding yourself more importantly, and see how you can. You may have to, as they say, go underground, not necessarily literally, but be underground. Okay, remember how, for those of you, remember what we had before the internet. What did we have? Okay, just remember that. Don't ruminate about it. Okay, you start navigating and aligning your life properly with that knowing. Okay, what was it like? Okay, and what, and say, ask yourself, okay, where's my accountability? Where's my responsibility in all of this? So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this right now because I do, like I said, have things to do, but just know what to do, know how to do it, and no one has to know